Did everybody read it?
Yes.
The full report? So that's always the first thing to do, is to read it and digest it. And also, what you need to also, in the very beginning, when our agents in the city started using these in Long Island and the Hamptons, Brooklyn, and Queens, and then the rental report, initially, because it is such raw data, people don't like it sometimes. And so it's like, well, I would never give this to my clients. Well, it's the way that you do give it to your clients, because the fact of the matter is they're going to read it anyways. So what you need to do is you need to read it so that you can help talk to them and put it in a context. Now, some of the things that we do that I would recommend that you guys do, I would also take along with this whenever the any of the reports come out. For example, especially the Manhattan and the Hamptons market report, I would definitely digest those, read them, synthesize them, and send those out to your clients as well. Because remember, what we want to do is send the message that we are more than just Westchester, that you are Douglas Elliman, which is, and there's going to be a Florida report coming pretty soon as well. That'll be a great one to send out. So if we take a look at the city right now, just so you know, we're up 30% in the city over last year. So it's pretty huge. The city is absolutely on fire. Inventory is at all-time lows. So what you're also seeing here is a decline in inventory, a sharp decline according to the market report. What, 38%, something like that? So, I mean, that is also very good to talk to buyers about, is that the same inventory reduction that we have in New York City, we're also experiencing in Westchester. The issue that we have in the city, though, we have an appreciating market, in some areas a really hot appreciation. You know, we have like 4 to 14%, depending on which neighborhood you're in. But what we want to talk about with the Westchester report, and especially, for example, what area would you say, because you have to tell me, is the area that would best reflect your market? Because he broke it out into by location. Northeast, Central, Matrix. And so when you look at the data that he has there, that the average sale price, now remember, the average sale price can really be swayed, especially when you don't have a lot of transactions. And we had this a couple years ago in the city where we didn't have a lot of transactions happening. This was right after the Lehman Brothers crash. And then all of a sudden you'd have one big sale and it would totally skew the market. So average sales price, we always combine that with the median, because the median, as you know, is the number that's smack in the middle. So that's more reflective of what is really going on in the market. So when you look at your average sale price, is that price, I'm going to talk to you guys, just openly. When you look at an average sale price for the Northeast at $949, does that feel comfortable for you guys? Or are you seeing something different?
Yeah. I think that's comfortable.
Now, what do you think your client...
As an average, what's the median?
Well, yeah.
The median is $657.
It's so different. It's 300,000 difference. It's
Right.
1.5 times. So it's the average sale price is too high.
Right. So and probably it might have been skewed by. Go ahead.
It might be too high, I think, for some of the towns, but not all the towns. And I don't think it's as much of a skew right now as it used to be, because our high-end market has dropped in price. Mm-hmm. So this is pretty close to Bedford, Tacona, but it's probably not Chappaqua and Pleasantville. Mm-mm. So I think we have to take our towns and write a cover letter saying specifically, this is the north central area, but this is what's happening in our specific locale, because we're very provincial in the area.
All right. So here's what the agents do in the city. They do exactly that. So, for example, if you looked at, when you start to look at the market report, if you look at luxury lofts or whatever, downtown is a loft environment, but Tribeca is very different than Chelsea. Chelsea, even though Chelsea spans over to 10th Avenue, where the High Line is, the average prices over in the High Line versus in center Chelsea are very different. So the agents, when they send this out, what they do is exactly what Barbara suggested, is they talk about, here's what's happening in Chelsea in general, but when we look at, for example, the Central Chelsea, which is around 6th and 7th Avenue, versus the High Line section of Chelsea, they do a limo search, so they would do similar to your MLS search to look at, here's the pricing of the Highline District, here's the pricing of Central Chelsea. Now the reason that the pricing of Central Chelsea is so much higher per square foot than the Highline District is because the Highline District is on the outskirts, it's what they call fringe, there's not a lot of transportation there. Also, right when Lehman Brothers hit, that is where there was a lot of construction and where the pre-construction purchases stopped. And so what happens is when pre-construction, when that stopped, is that when the banks tightened up their lending requirements, so all of a sudden it was very difficult, if it was less than 50% sold, to get a loan. So you could probably transfer that whole idea to areas here when everything stopped and prices were still here, but banks would only lend here. And that's why the conversation with whoever is working with you as far as your loan officer is to talk about how did lending criteria and restrictions and that constriction of it, how did that impact what was going on up here? Who could give me some ideas with that?
Well, it stopped the builders. I mean, it just stopped new construction in its tracks.
And in the city as well. The only thing that's being built right now in the city are hotels.
And nothing, I mean, very few things are being, more than we saw in 2009-10. But, you know, it was just, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the builders can't get loans. They can't get them in the city. They can't get them on Long Island. They can't get them in the Hamptons. It's all self-funded now. What's happening in terms of if the builders are getting it, they're getting it from somebody that they're working with. It's coming from private sources.
That's exactly what's happening, and you know, everything in Bedford's usually, you know, small lots. It's a redo many times. It's not anything that's subdivisional, if you will. The subdivision people are out in Somers, a little bit further north. But that's exactly what has happened. They can't get the money. They can't get rid of their inventory. And many times these builders are building one-on-one, you know, one lot at a time.
Right. So now sitting with homeowners, if you're going to go in and do pricing with homeowners and you want to utilize some of this data, how would you utilize it? I mean, nobody's got it right or wrong here. I'm just trying to get us all talking about it.
What happens in the city is going to actually come up here.
It's going to trickle out here. I mean, I would certainly use that. That's one of the reasons why I would send the Manhattan report, is to let them know, for example, that we were dead in the water, really dead in the water. But what happens is you have that pent-up demand, and some of the things that you guys saw up here that we didn't really benefit from was you had the first-time home buyer tax credit that we really, the sales in the city just didn't really qualify for it. In some parts it did. So, you know, but I would bet also here the first-time home buyer's tax credit didn't mean hoot in some areas. So that, again, becomes a piece of conversation. And that's what these reports are for. It's to get data out to the clients, but more importantly, it's to get a conversation going between you and the clients. And what I know is that for the most part, your competition doesn't have this kind of data to be able to talk to them about, nor do they have the brains half the time to be able to talk about it. Because even in our own company, I watch the agents never ever read these reports, never look at these reports, and then just gush out of their mouth things that really aren't true and aren't there. Hey, how are you? So, if anybody's idea, how would you want to use this, say, for example, at an open house?
Well, you could give it out to people that come in. I mean, you know, you hand it out so people are educated. I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And what I would do is just what Barbara had talked about before, and what we talked about, that for that open house, reflective of that house. Where does that house fit in the scheme of things? Because that's another thing. People come from the city, they've started to educate themselves about up here, but they really don't know. And you're shaking your head, so you know that. I mean, that is where you can, for example, when the city buyers are coming out here on the weekends or coming up to look at properties, being able to talk specifically about that house. I would absolutely have financing information there. And, you know, not just here's what the current rates are, but here's the kind of product you can get, and here is what the down payment has to be on this property in order to be able to get it. Because that's going to really construct what kind of buyer is going to be there. It's going to give them the criteria. They're going to walk in, they're going to know if they're going to be able to handle it or not. And what we talked about the other day is you also, at some point, once we get the bugs out of it, you also, for some of you, you could have a computer there so that people can sit and do some searches online while they're there at your open house. That is working for